Your Help presents Stress-Free Living with Ray Samich and Mr. Stress-Free, Ratanjit S. Sandhi. This audio program is an unscripted and unrehearsed conversation between Ray and Ratanjit. It is shared with you in hope of adding value to your life. We encourage you to listen to this program in its entirety to receive the full impact of its message. Sit back, relax, open your heart, mind, and soul to this edition of Stress-Free Living.
Welcome to Stress-Free Living. So good to have you with us here today. I'm Ray Samich, and I would like to introduce you today, as always, to my dear friend, colleague, longtime co-host, Ratanjit Sandhi. Ratanjit, how are you today?
Wonderful, Ray. How are you?
Excellent, thank you. And we want to welcome you, whether you are joining us on the radio or the internet live, wintradio.com in the Cleveland area, on AM, FM radio, or anywhere around the world. If you are catching the replay of this on our YouTube radio channel, which is YouTube Stress-Free Living Radio. And you can get that at any time, 24/7, 365, anywhere around the world. All of our shows are now posted out there on the YouTube channel. Ratanjit, there's a interesting series of words that you and I have talked about, and we've done that with some of our Zoom callers that we really enjoy talking with, because that's another way that you can enjoy our show live every week. We do it on a Zoom channel. And we've talked about being aware, having awareness of what's around us. And the word that we've kind of used for that in our discussions is mindfulness. Being aware of, in the moment, what's happening at any given time and how we need to respond to that, what we need to do without all the distractions that are so much around us. So how can we be more mindful? That's really a strong question, Ratanjit, that we're going to ask you about today. How can we be more aware of the moment and live in the moment, capture the moment, maximize what we can do as a living human being in the moment?
Yes, everyone would like to go there, because when you are mindful, your productivity is at your peak. You can use all your intelligence, you can use all your capabilities when you are fully engaged. But see, what happens in real life, Ray, supposing you have a pain in your arm, or somewhere it is you hit it and it's hurting. So now if you are talking about something, you are writing an essay or you are doing something, your mind is go to that pain. So you don't have your full mind available to you, right?
Right.
So similarly, when you have some worry, if your landlord has given you notice and you don't have the payment to pay, or you have so much money and gas price has gone up and you can only fill, but you have to go somewhere and you need a full tank full. So all these things, there are so many worries in our life which occupy your mind. Your mind is constantly preoccupied with the worries or with the fear or with your greed, with your ego. All these things preoccupy your mind. And that's why.
And you're exactly right. I didn't mean to cut you off, but the ones you gave examples of are things that directly relate to us. Okay, those occupy our mind. But you and I had a conversation before the show this morning about what's happening in Ukraine right now. Okay, and that really doesn't affect us on a personal basis. We don't really know people there, as our family or whatever, but our heart goes out for them. And the tragedy of what's happening there is on our mind. And the tragedy of knowing that there's homeless people that are in around the world, and starving people, and children that are dying because of malnutrition. I mean, all of these things are also in our mind, and they don't directly affect our day-to-day living, but we are mindful of them, and they're, I don't mean to say that they're not important, because they're critically important, maybe most important of all, but they get, they take over our mind, because we think about all of these different things, and we don't do what we need to do and can do in our own lives. So how do we block those out? Do we want to block those out, or are those good things that there are in our brain?
See, you mentioned mind and heart. In Buddhist language, there is only one word for both mind and heart.
Really?
It's called citta. Citta.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, it's so we separate mind, because your mind is always affected by what is in your heart, and your heart is always affected by what is in your mind. They're interconnected. They're all ultimately one. So if somewhere there's a pain to other human being, we have empathy, and as a consequence of empathy, we will be affected until you are parked in high ego mode. Then you don't have empathy. You lose empathy when you are in the ego mode. We talked about that. There is a neuroscience research which tells us that your mirror neuron in your brain, which are responsible for creating empathy, and the activity in the mirror neuron in the brain dies when you are parked in your ego, or when you are proud, when you have a pride in you. So all those things destroy your capability to connect to others. And as a consequence, you undermine the performance of your mind. So your mindfulness, it is essential to have empathy. So mindfulness is compromised when you are proud, when you are parked in the ego.
So we're kind of, I hear you and you're speaking brilliantly, but we're also kind of talking in circles, because when I think about being more mindful, I think about being able to zero in and accomplish things. And yet the idea that you've just said is, when we're more mindful, we're more empathetic to the world, empathetic to all of the issues and all of the problems, and we feel with our mind and our heart what everybody is going through. So this seems to be a contradiction of sorts in terms of what we accomplish by being mindful. It is ultimate mindfulness. Does that mean that we are aware of everything, that where our radar is up for all of the injustice and all of the problems of the world? Is that what mindful means, really?
See, you are a very creative person. If you are given a project where tremendous new creativity is required, at that point, you need all your capabilities. At that point, the mirror neurons give you to connect to that internal requirement of that project. So empathy there is not with other people. Empathy there becomes empathy to the project. So empathy is required to be fully creative.
Okay.
We only think of empathy with other people. Empathy connects us to emotion. Emotions are part of creativity. Emotions are part of digging deep into a project. Until you are emotionally tied into a project, you're not going to give out your best.
Well, I understand that, and I agree with you completely. I never thought of empathy being for anything other than people, but I guess if we have to do a specific task in order to serve people or benefit other people, maybe that's how the empathy comes in. I am being able to be creative with empathy because I know that the creativity I'm using is going to be able to solve this problem or reach these people, communicate effectively with these people. So I can get that. My other question, though, that I asked that maybe I didn't ask it properly. Really, maybe let's start with this, Ratanjit. What is your definition of being mindful? What do you think that to ultimately be mindful, what does that mean to you?
Mindfulness means I am able to utilize my fullest capacity of the brain and heart available to me. And there are no distractions. So anytime there are distractions, I don't have the full capability of these amazing creative tools available to me. And those distractions come from many directions, Ray. They can come from, because our mind is constantly thinking. There are so many thoughts which are coming in our mind. If you have come from a friend's funeral, and now you are sitting there on a creative project, half your mind is preoccupied with what happened in the funeral, and your sadness is still there with you. So you don't have your full mind available to you. So it's the same thing when you have come from a graduation party of your grandchild or your younger brother or something. You are so excited, and now you're sitting down working on a project. You don't have all the mind available to you. So to have mind available to us, we have to be free of sorrow and pleasure, both.
Yeah, what you're saying makes sense, and I like your definition of it. I just don't. I am very much confused, and I'm glad we're early in the show because we have time to talk it through. But I'm very confused how we can be mindful, which means use our mind and use our heart about what's going on, and yet at the same time not be distracted by all of those things that we're using our heart and our mind to understand. So let's take one of the examples you said. We came from a funeral of a friend. Okay, so we're now very empathetic to what our friend was just experiencing, and we feel very badly for them because let's say they lost their father, and so we feel badly for them knowing that they're not going to have their father in their life and that they're going through this anguish and loss. We think about maybe if we have our own father, what it would be like to lose them, or maybe we already have lost our own father or parent or somebody else special in our life, and we think about all of that and how that makes us feel and the loss that we're having or the loss we would have projecting into the future. So all of these things are all over our brain. And now we have to come and do, like you said, a project. We have to work on that. Do we want to take that mindfulness of that other situation out of our brain? Do we need to take that out? Because those are beautiful feelings. Those are real world, real life thoughts that we should have, I would think. That not to get caught up in money is so important and power is important and success and fame and being a celebrity. I'm really talking about real world issues of life and love and loss and compassion. To me, those would be things that I want to have in my brain and in my heart that would help me to do other projects. So that's why I'm confused.
So in order for us to take those things out of our brain, I'm not saying that we are not sympathetic to that. We should not be able to do something for them. Those are different issues. But in order for me to have my total capacity of my brain available to me, I have to practice two things. One is unconditional acceptance, and other is unconditional gratefulness. See, so there are two things. There are difficulties come to us, and then there are joy and successes come to us, and they both distract us. So when difficulty come to us, we accept 100% as a challenge, a new project to add value. We are not passing any judgment of good or bad. Under that circumstance, it's just like a doctor. When a patient is brought to them who had severe accident, broken ribs and broken legs and all that, the doctor focuses on how to make sure that that person's vital signs are working, and then eventually to fix him so that he or she becomes completely healthy. So the doctor is not parked in the judgment of how this happens. He or she accepts the condition he is given. Whereas we waste so much energy and time in judging and why this happened, and this guy should be punished, and this guy should be revenge and all that. We are not focused on accepting and going forward to correct it. Acceptance does not mean that you do not correct it. Acceptance means you go forward and change the paradigm so that this does not happen again. So that is one area. The other side, when good things happen to us, we are so excited that I did it, I was able to achieve this. Oh my God, my mind is preoccupied. We have to constantly remember that all our successes are in spite of us, never because of us. And that should park us in utter gratefulness. And once you are in the gratefulness mode, all your faculties are available to you. You disown the success. You give credit to the divine power. And you simply are again refocused on adding the highest value. So that is how you achieve the mindfulness.
Okay. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about both of those a little more. Unconditional acceptance, unconditional gratefulness. We're going to talk even more. You did a real good job laying those out, but I want to talk more about them. But it also seems, going back to my earlier question, that we're not supposed to keep certain things in our mind as we are going forward. We have to separate anything that could be distracting from being mindful. Even good things, even empathetic things, even compassionate things, we have to separate from those. And to me, there's still a misunderstanding that I have in what we separate, what we want to consider distractions, and what we want to be in our mind and our heart in order to be mindful. Because the word full and mindful, to me, is that we have everything in there, and we don't want to have everything in there. Obviously, we have to separate what helps us and what hinders us. So when we come back, we need to take a break. When we come back from this break, I'd like to go deeper into that. For being mindful, what do we separate? What do we consider distraction that we don't need to be mindful? And what do we need to hold on to that we absolutely will help us in our journey to be mindful and have the most mindfulness? Am I making sense, Ratanjit, with the question?
Yes.
Okay, you take a few minutes while we take a break, and we'll talk to our Zoom guest here. We're excited to always do that. They're with us, and we will be right back in just a minute on Stress-Free Living. All right, we have about 90 seconds. We'd love your input. What do you think? Questions that I can ask Ratanjit for you? Dr. Jagjit, anything?
No, everything is fine.
Okay.
I will just be hearing most of the time.
Okay, that's fine. We just want to make sure we include you if you have anything. We love your input.
Thanks.
Is it our other guest there? Is it Hajinder? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, Harjinder. Very quickly, we have maybe a minute.
Yeah, we have about 40 seconds, I would guess.
Sir, just after listening something more about this, I will be saying something.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you. Okay. I like what you explained so far, Ratanjit. I'm just, I am fighting with that. It seems to me a disconnect. Mindful, but we have to choose what we want to put into our mind. What distraction, I think, is a key word we're going to come back with. What are distractions and what are necessities to be mindfulness? Okay, I think we have 15 seconds left here. We are back on Stress-Free Living. Ratanjit and yours truly, Ray Samich, with you today, talking about how we can be the most mindful. And does that affect our stress? You know, so many things, if we're not doing exactly the way we were intended to do it, if we are not operating in a way that is consistent with our our creator and how we were created, then it causes stress in our lives. And so mindfulness is today's topic. Does that create stress if we're not being mindful? Or does it create stress if we are being mindful? That's what we're kind of talking about here today on the program. Ratanjit, I gave you a couple minutes to think about my question. What are the distractions that we need to separate from in order to be mindful? And what are not distractions that are necessities for us to be mindful and be able to really think with our mind and our heart for the best decision making?
See, it's like this, Ray. You are sitting in your office. It's a nice day. You have window open and you're working, concentrating. And suddenly these little children started playing outside and they're making so much noise and they are distracting you. So you have to close the window so that you can concentrate. So let's first understand where the distractions are coming from. So all our distractions are generated by our assumption of I being a separate entity. As a consequence, we begin to think I am the human body. I operate in the human body mode. In the human body mode, we know this human body is going to die. So I am always full of caution. I'm afraid something may hit me, something. So I am full of fear. And then I need to feed this human body. I am always looking to collect enough food or enough money or enough thing around me. I'm going to be parked in greed. And I'm also, because I'm thinking of myself as a separate, I have to have ego. I have to have a self-worth, which I consider through the ego mode. So in that mode, all our distractions are going to be coming from my worries, my fear, my greed, my insecurity, all that is going to distract me. So now there are two methods. One is a proactive method. One is a proactive and one is a not very active method. So when you do meditation, means you look at the breath coming out and watch the breath constantly. So you remove your mind's focus from worries and from greed and from all those things. And temporarily, your mind starts to feel fresh. So when you get out of that exercise, you have a much higher presence of mind. But there is that's not a complete cure. There is another method.
Can we talk more before you go to the second one? Can we talk more about that one?
Sure.
Okay. I just want to fully understand that, because, and before I ask you more about it, is there any problem? I know you're going to have a second method. Is there any problem with using that first method, with that meditation, the breathing, the kind of getting into the moment? You're recommending that, right? That is a good method to use.
It's
right?
a good method if you are part in the human body mode.
Okay, so
and we all are, and when we are not able to transfer ourselves from the human body mode to the oneness mode, that method works.
I wanted to stop on that for a second, because I just had an experience just yesterday when I was with somebody who was very overwhelmed and legitimately overwhelmed. I mean, real world problems of all magnitudes that were suddenly surrounding them. And some of them had major implications for finance and for health and for family and all these things. Sometimes it just seems like it's a day that everything happens that could possibly happen. And some were good, some were bad, but overwhelming in their entirety. And so I did suggest, I says, just stop and breathe. I didn't have any good recommendations. I didn't know what the answer was that could make everything go away, but I just said, stop and breathe. And I suggested gratefulness, okay, because of our conversations. And I said, just be grateful for everything you've got, so that no matter what happens that could be happening at this moment, look at what you already have and the good things that are in your life and that you've been able to be blessed with. And so that was a moment, I think, maybe a little different variation of meditation, but because it wasn't extended breathing and things, but it was just take a breath, just stop and take one breath. And it seemed to help. It seemed to take that moment of extreme, almost insanity, with the culmination of everything, and just to bring it down to a controlled moment of, okay, I'm okay again, So I just wanted to expand on that, because sometimes we feel that way. I mean, sometimes we're just out of control in the moment, and that does seem to help. That does seem to be able to make us mindful again of what's around us.
Absolutely. See, you have to remember, we are always going to fluctuate from the human body mode. And if we have been taught to move into the oneness mode, which requires efforts, which requires understanding, mindfulness. And when we are fully operating in the oneness mode, of course, we are fully mindful. That is where you have total mindfulness available to you. But because we are going to constantly fluctuate, so there are moments you are in the human body mode, and you have to be in the human body mode to operate in certain, because you have to feed the human body, you have a family, you have the situations. So you have to be careful. And that moment, meditation helps. So meditation, before you go into meditation, the two things I mentioned, unconditional acceptance and unconditional gratitude. Those are the two catalysts which will help you to go into meditation in a much quicker and better way. When you are meditating, you are basically focusing entirely on your breath. So you take away the focus from your insecurity, from your greed, from your problems and all that. So it allows the mind to refresh itself. So when you come out of the meditation, you feel definitely better. You have a better control on yourself. So meditation is what is mostly practiced for mindfulness. But that mindfulness, Ray, is not 100% mindfulness. That is not, total mind is still not available to you until you fully comprehend the paradigm of oneness, until you fully realize who you are. It is only in that mode you become immune to all sufferings, all pains, all insecurities, and that is where you become true service. And when you are in that mode, whatever you undertake with a complete and full mind available to you.
So how do we get to that point? How do we have meditation, use meditation in that mode?
Well,
I mean, is that something we can do on a momentary basis, or is that just something that is on our journey that we want to eventually have that understanding and do it there? I'm trying to understand these two different methods. I can do that first one at any time, right? I mean, as in a human mode, I can still do that first one. Can I do that second one at any given time, or is that part of my quest to get there?
So it is, again, we use the same instrument of meditation to get into oneness, but your objective is different. One is first time when you are starting to do meditation and you are upset and you are constantly preoccupied by all the difficulties you are experiencing, then this body mode meditation, in other words, focusing on the breath and taking your mind away from all these problems momentarily would help you. And breath is also oxygenating the human body. It also makes your system calmer and your brain refurbishes with oxygen. So that physically also it helps oxygenation. And if you take deep breaths and you focus on the breathing, you notice the breath going in and notice the breath coming out, because this brain, the monkey, you have to preoccupy it to do something, because it cannot sit idle. If you do not give any task to this brain, it'll figure out the task. It'll start worrying, it'll start doing this. So we are giving a task to this brain to watch your breath coming in and coming out. So we are tying the brain temporarily to calm down. So that is how we control this.
I need to interject, because for some of our regular listeners, when you referred to the monkey, the brain of the monkey, they know what you're talking about. But for some new people that perhaps haven't been with us before, we need to give and explain that analogy, because you think of a monkey that is so active, jumping from place to place and from tree to tree and from limb to limb, and they're just constantly energetic, and it becomes out of control. So if you assign that monkey a task just to climb up and down a pole, for example, then you can control that monkey. The monkey is not going to stop moving, but you assign it a task so that it is in an organized manner and you don't have to be out of control. And so you just referred, so that's how we use our brain. Our brain is out of control. It's just running from item to item to item, distraction to distraction, kind of like this wild monkey that is just swinging on all these limbs and trees and branches. And so I wanted to explain and clarify what you meant by that, in case people were wondering, where did that come from? All this is making sense to me, Ratanjit. I am learning a lot. I really never thought meditation of any sort was a part of being mindful. I don't know why. I never thought we'd go there today in this show, but it makes a lot of sense. I still don't think you've answered the question that I posed at the beginning of this, though. I'm still confused with being mindful implies that you're aware of everything, that you have all kinds of things in your brain because you're mindful. I mean, the nature of the word says I'm aware of everything, but I'm able to zero in on things. I'm confused to what we consider distractions and what we consider necessities to be mindful. In our earlier examples, if you don't mind just a little more, because I'm still trying to piece this together. In the earlier examples, we talked about being compassionate, being empathetic, having our mind and our heart engaged in real world issues. To me, those seem to be things that we want to have in our mind and our brain to be mindful. And yet some of those can be distractions too. What's the line between good distractions, if you will, and bad distractions?
See, what is confusing you is the word mindful. Means you are thinking at one given time, you are aware of everything. Think of it like a flashlight. Now, in a dark room, you're looking for things, and wherever you point the flashlight, and it is very powerful, you have a complete picture of that spot, right? So that is what mindfulness gives you. You have full capability of that light available to you to put on any particular problem, and you will begin to see the entirety of that problem through that mindfulness. But mindfulness doesn't mean that on a given moment you are everything you have, you are aware of everything, but you have to focus on one thing exclusively to utilize the power of this mind. So concentration.
I love that analogy. That is a powerful way of focusing in with the flashlight. Great. But don't the other issues in our mind and our heart impact how we focus? I mean, if we are coming from an empathetic mindset,
Yes.
Again, earlier in the show, we talked about attending a funeral, okay? The empathy that we have in our brain, doesn't that change the laser focus of that flashlight because we're in that mindset?
Yes. See, that is what we are talking about, because if you are parked in the human body mode, your focus is always going to be contaminated. If you are looking at, supposing that flashlight has a outer cover. And there are 4 or 5 lines which are blocking the full vision. So that's what we will have. The lines which are blocking the full vision is our insecurity or greed or fear. All that will, no matter what problem you are looking at, is going to be influenced by those contaminations. And you are never able to see the full correct picture of any situation. Make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I guess suddenly we take that super bright white flashlight light, the ultimate powerful light, and suddenly we're putting a blue screen over it or a green screen over the front of it, right? And it's changing. It doesn't allow us to focus anymore because whatever that color is, including a completely dark black screen that just completely stops the light completely. And at that point, it has no ability to show any light through it because it is completely dark. I guess that's what happens with our human feelings and our human thoughts that prevent that light from shining and giving us that focus. It's hard for me to understand the goodness that we get from our feelings, from the ego ones. Even when I gave the example earlier, I said we feel for our friend who lost his father. Our heart goes out to them. But I also included, but we think of our own loss of our own father. Okay. And on the surface, I think most people would say, well, those are genuine, wonderful thoughts, real world thoughts of compassion for your friend and of loss and loss for you. I want to categorize those in a box of good things, of
But
kindness.
you have to think about something. If we lost our father, why am I sad? I'm sad because now I don't have his love. I don't have somebody to talk to. So I am basically sad for what I cannot do. I'm not really sad for his dying.
Yeah, I'm sad for what I don't have. So
Right.
yeah, I know.
So that is again insecurity, greed, and fear driven.
Yeah. Sometimes fear and greed are easy to see. Greed, I want to steal the candy bar in the store. Okay. That isn't mine. I mean, that's obviously wrong. And it's greedy that I would think of taking that. Okay. Or I want to take, I'm upset that my neighbor has a brand new car and I'm still driving a 10-year-old car. So I'm greedy of him. Those are easy to see, the good, the right and the wrong, the good and the bad. Something like a loss of a loved one, it's hard to see that as being, anything other than a good feeling, a loving feeling, a kind feeling. It's hard to look at that and say, no, what that really is you're upset because you don't have something in your life. And so, it's not a positive thing.
There is another side of it. Supposing your friend was coming to see, or in a family, somebody met with an accident on the road and died. Now, that's one kind of shock. But other side of his reason of dying could be that he is diagnosed with a cancer. Now he is suffering for 3 years and now he's dying. So generally, we have a much peace of mind when somebody suffers and dies rather than a quick death. Whereas the quick death is better for the person, he doesn't suffer. But so this is the desire for our loved one. We want them to suffer and then die. We don't want them to die quickly.
No, you're right. You're right. So it's about, all of the factors, all the information, most of the time, which we don't have when we're making our decisions and evaluations. I just looked at the watch. We're way over time here. We need to take a quick break. One last break here. We'll come back and try to wrap up everything that we've been talking about here today as we try to be more mindful. I need to be more mindful of the clock here. Ratanjit, we'll be right back on Stress Free Living.
Thank you.
All right, we do have 90 seconds here. If anybody wants to pitch in, Kim, welcome. Anybody have a thought here in our last few seconds?
Thank you. I've lost people both ways, a 33-year-old sister in a car crash. And wow, what the conversation or the remarks that Ratanjit just made, while it was very shocking, I am happy that she did not suffer.
Yeah.
It's all.
I mean, you don't want to lose them either way. But
I know. And she had 8 children, and I took in 3 of them while I was still in graduate school. And sometimes I talk to her and I say, I'm suffering because you left the kids that I now have to take care of.
Yeah, right.
Oh my gosh, it's so much work. I love them all. But...
Yeah, no, it's just the reality of the world. It's not easy.
Yeah, thank you for the conversation this morning.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for joining us.
Anybody have any other quick thoughts?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Please go ahead.
Quick.
So
Quickly though.
sir, in mindfulness, this is, I think there should be we should differentiate between mindfulness and awareness, because that will make the things more clear. And so far my thinking goes, I think mindfulness is about focus. So there are no thoughts and no distractions, and we are at very much present there. But in awareness, it is being totally conscious about the situations. So I think Mr. Ratanjit will do me a favor to make it more clear.
Okay. I think we got the answer there. Thank you. We're gonna mute everyone again here to get back in the show. And we are back on Stress Free Living. Ray Samich, Ratanjit Sandhi with you, wrapping up our topic today on mindfulness and what does that really mean. Ratanjit, we had some great feedback there during the break from our Zoom guests. We love talking with them. And one of them asked about distinguishing the difference. And maybe that's what I have been confused with my conversation. The difference between awareness and mindfulness. And you've established here during the show that mindfulness is that laser focus. It's that flashlight in the totally dark room that allows us to focus on certain things, where maybe the awareness is when the big light is on in the ceiling of that room and you see hundreds of things, or maybe in a storage room, thousands of things that are in there, and you're aware of everything in there, but it's impossible to focus on what's important in the moment. Would that be how you would define the difference?
Awareness makes you the detail available. You are aware of all the details present in the situation. That's what awareness is.
Okay.
And without mindfulness, you cannot have awareness. Mindfulness.
I would think it's the other way. You have to be aware first, then you can be mindful. You have to be mindful first?
Yes. You have to be mindful to be aware. How can you be aware without mindful? You don't have the tools to be aware. Awareness is a consequence of mindfulness.
Oh. You don't seem to think that that's a big deal, but that's a really big deal. Ratanjit, that's if you're not able to lay, what you've just told me is that if you can't laser in on what the problem is, You have to do that first before you can.
Mindfulness is availability of your mind. And with this mind, you become aware. Without the availability of mind, how can you be aware of anything?
Okay. So the mindfulness is about my status. It isn't
Availability of your mind.
Okay.
You can utilize laser
I'm glad we
focus.
came up with this before we left. All
So
right.
you can laser focus the mind if you want. So it's like a flashlight. You rotate the head, it can laser focus it, but you can have wide angle, so you can see the wide area. So, but without the flashlight, you can have neither the focus or the wideness.
All right. So maybe I've been totally wrong, in this whole conversation here, but mindfulness is a state of me irrelevant of any of those distractions. When I've been asking you what are good distractions and bad distractions in order to be mindful, I was trying to separate all the components of mindfulness, but I think what you've just said now is mindfulness is my state of mind, my state of heart, okay, irrelevant of any of the distractions,
Right.
irrelevant of anything that's around me. It's how I am ready to do that focusing.
So how do you remove the distractions? First, by accepting, which is the bad side, and the good side is by being grateful. So you take yourself out, so your mind is freed.
So they're all distractions. I mean,
they're all
even
that
the
is why-
kindness, even
that
the
is why
love, even
when you consider a really spiritual person, they are not influenced by either when something happened good or something happens to them which is bad. They are in the same state of mind. They are not influenced by good or bad. They don't distinguish between good or bad. They are in the same state of mind.
Wow, I'm so glad we came up with this at the end. You came up with this at the end, because I've really been under a misunderstanding for this entire program of what mindfulness ultimately is. I've been trying to separate what we should be thinking about and what we shouldn't be, what should concern us and not, and trying to define good and bad and right or wrong. And I've been having a difficult time doing that. Basically, all distractions
All distractions
are need to be eliminated for us to
are
be mindful.
attachment of the human body. So that is why, to be purely mindful, you have to think of you as the enlivening power, not the human body. The power which enlivens you, which brings life in you, which is the same present in everyone. It is only in that mode you can have full mindfulness. And it is only in that mode you are accepting every challenge comes to you as an opportunity to serve the enlivening power present in others. So that becomes your mission of life, is to add the highest value.
And to your earlier example that you gave of the tragedy, either way, of a person dying in a car crash or dying after 5 years of suffering cancer, this makes so much more sense now when you gave that example, because we don't have the information. We don't ultimately know what's good and what's bad.
Right.
And so when we have the distractions and we think these are good things and good thoughts and bad thoughts, we can't really make that judgment call anyway, because we don't know, right? So we eliminate all of them. We eliminate all those distractions and not waste time trying to pick the good and the bad ones. They're all distractions. We need to be in a state of gratitude and acceptance and be mindful of everything. Oh, you did it. Ratanjit, thank you. Just in time, too. We have to go. We thank you so much for being with us here today for this edition of Stress Free Living. Ratanjit, we thank you, especially today. You really drove that home here at the end, and we appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Remember, folks, we're all playing the same game. We'll talk to you again real soon.